The sun was setting over the city skyline, casting long shadows through the windows of the top-floor office at Innovative Solutions Incorporated. The CEO sat alone. His designer jacket hung over his chair, sleeves rolled up as he scrolled through the latest employee satisfaction survey on his tablet. The results made his stomach sink. "How did we get here?" he whispered to himself, running a hand over his face. 15 years ago, he'd started this tech company in his garage with just 3 computers and a dream. Now, looking out over the sprawling office space below through his floor-to-ceiling windows, he could barely recognize what it had become. The numbers on his screen told a story he didn't want to read. Employee satisfaction down 23% from last year. Trust in management at an all-time low. Comments about feeling disconnected, unheard, undervalued. Each statistic felt like a personal failure. He picked up a framed photo from his desk, a picture from the company's first anniversary celebration. Back then, they all used to have lunch together, sharing ideas over pizza and energy drinks. He knew everyone's stories, their dreams, their struggles. Now, he couldn't remember the last time he'd had a real conversation with anyone below senior management. The contrast hit him hard. In the early days, he fought tooth and nail to build this company, facing skeptics who doubted a black man could succeed in Silicon Valley. He'd proven them wrong, but at what cost? Had he become the very thing he'd sworn to fight against? Another out-of-touch boss in an ivory tower. His phone buzzed with another calendar reminder. Board meeting, Q4 strategy review. He ignored it, standing up to walk to the window. Below, he could see employees leaving for the day, some rushing to catch their buses, others walking to the parking lot in groups, laughing about something he couldn't hear. That's when it hit him. The annual company-wide meeting was coming up in 2 months. Everyone expected the usual PowerPoint presentation, fake smiles, and corporate speak. But what if he did something completely different? He sat back down at his desk and opened his laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The idea forming in his mind was either brilliant or crazy, maybe both. He started typing. Operation Ground Level. Undercover Integration Plan. His heart raced as he outlined his plan. He would transform himself into a new hire, work alongside his employees at every level, see the company through their eyes. No filters, no bureaucracy, just raw reality. But it wouldn't be easy. He looked at himself in the reflection of his office window. Designer watch, perfectly tailored clothes, the confident posture of someone used to being in charge. All of that would have to go. Could he pull it off? Could he really become just another face in the crowd? He thought about his father, who'd worked 2 jobs his whole life, always telling him, "You can't know the truth of a thing until you've lived it yourself." Maybe it was time to live that lesson. Opening his email, he drafted a message to his most trusted board member. Need to discuss unconventional approach to understanding our company culture issues. Confidential meeting requested. As he hit send, doubt crept in. The board would think he was losing his mind. His executive team would say it was too risky. But looking at the employee survey one more time, he knew in his gut this was the right move. He pulled out his phone and Googled disguise consultants. If he was going to do this, he'd need help becoming unrecognizable. This wasn't just about changing his appearance. He'd need a whole new way of talking, walking, and behaving. The sky outside had grown dark, city lights twinkling like stars. He stood up, gathering his things, mind racing with possibilities. Tomorrow, he'd start putting this wild plan into motion. But tonight, he had some serious thinking to do about what kind of leader, what kind of person, he really wanted to be. As he stepped into the elevator, his reflection stared back at him from the mirrored walls. Time to remember what it feels like to start from the bottom, he said to himself, pressing the button for the ground floor. This time, instead of rushing to his car, he decided to walk to the bus stop. It was time to start seeing things from a different perspective. 1 week later, The CEO found himself sitting in a dimly lit studio apartment across town, far from his usual upscale neighborhood. A professional transformation expert stood before him, arms crossed, studying his appearance with intense focus. "We need to make you completely unrecognizable," the expert said, circling him slowly. "But it has to look natural enough that no one gives you a second glance." She pulled out a large case filled with various items, clothes, accessories, and other tools of her trade. The CEO shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He'd never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. The expert had already made him change into plain jeans and a simple t-shirt from a local department store. His designer watch was gone, replaced by a basic digital timepiece. His perfectly maintained haircut would soon be transformed, too. "The key isn't just changing how you look," she explained, pulling out several items from her case. "It's changing how you carry yourself. Right now, everything about you screams executive. Your posture, your walk, even the way you hold your hands." For the next few hours, they worked on his transformation. The expert taught him to slouch slightly, to walk with less purpose, to speak with less authority. It felt wrong, like wearing shoes on the wrong feet. His usual confident stride became more hesitant, his voice lost its commanding tone. "Remember," she coached, "you're not the boss anymore. You're someone starting over, someone who needs this job. That anxiety you're feeling right now, use it. It's exactly how a real new employee would feel." Looking in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. His usual clean-shaven face now had carefully maintained stubble. His sharp haircut had been replaced with something more average, less polished. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by outfits from regular stores, the kind his employees would actually wear. They spent hours practicing his new backstory. He was a former small business owner whose company hadn't survived the economic downturn. Now he was starting over, looking for a fresh start at the bottom. It wasn't entirely false. He had owned a small business once, long before his current success. The hardest part was changing his speech patterns. The expert recorded him talking and played it back, pointing out every time he slipped into boss mode. "Too confident," she'd say. "Too polished. Remember, you're nervous about this new job." That evening, he practiced his new identity in a local coffee shop. He ordered drinks, made small talk with the barista, intentionally using his new posture and voice. No one gave him a second glance. It was working. He had become invisible in the best possible way. Back in his real office later that night, he met with the few board members who knew about his plan. They stared at him, amazed by the transformation. "I almost didn't recognize you," one of them admitted. "But are you sure about this?" "The risks." "We need this," he insisted, his voice firm but tired from practicing his new way of speaking all day. "I need this. Something's broken in our company culture, and we can't fix it from up here." They spent the next hour finalizing the details. His absence would be explained as an extended business trip to overseas offices. A trusted assistant would secretly forward urgent matters to him. Everything else would have to wait. As he drove home that night, he caught glimpses of his new self in the rearview mirror. Each time, it startled him slightly. The gravity of what he was about to do weighed heavily on his shoulders. Starting Monday, he would become a completely different person. He parked in his garage and sat there for a moment, thinking about everything he'd learned today. It wasn't just about looking different. It was about experiencing his company from a completely new perspective. For the first time in years, he would see it through the eyes of those who built it from the ground up, day by day. Taking one last look in the mirror, he practiced his new nervous smile. First day on the job, he whispered to his reflection, feeling real butterflies in his stomach. Let's see what they're not telling the boss. Monday morning arrived with a mix of fog and nervous energy. The CEO, now completely transformed, stood in line at the employee entrance, clutching a cheap coffee thermos. His heart pounded as he watched his own employees walk past him without a second glance. He was just another new hire starting his first day. The customer service department buzzed with activity. Phones rang constantly, and the sound of dozens of conversations filled the air. A team lead with kind eyes and graying hair at her temples showed him to his desk, a tiny cubicle that felt worlds away from his spacious office upstairs. "First time in customer service?" she asked, helping him log into his computer. When he nodded, she gave him an encouraging smile. "Don't worry, we all started somewhere. Just remember to breathe." Her genuine warmth caught him off guard. This was the kind of interaction he never got to see from the top floor. As the day progressed, he fumbled through calls, genuinely struggling with the outdated computer system. The team lead patiently helped him navigate through each issue. "Yeah, the system's ancient," she sighed. "We've been asking for an upgrade for years, but I guess those requests never make it up the chain." That comment hit him like a punch to the gut. He'd always prided himself on running an efficient company, but here he was, watching his employees fight with slow computers and clunky software that belonged in the last decade. During lunch break, he sat in the cramped break room, eating a sandwich from home while listening to his coworkers talk. They discussed their lives, their struggles, their hopes. One woman talked about juggling 3 kids and a second job. Another mentioned skipping doctor's appointments because of high insurance deductibles, the very insurance plan he'd approved last year. The afternoon brought more eye-opening moments. A customer screamed at him over the phone about a technical issue. Before he could completely fumble the response, his desk neighbor quietly passed him a handwritten note with step-by-step instructions. This small act of kindness from someone who had no obligation to help touched him deeply. He watched in awe as the team handled crisis after crisis. When the shipping system crashed, causing chaos with customer orders, everyone jumped in to help. The team lead stayed an hour past her shift, missing her bus just to make sure all urgent cases were handled. But it was the conversations between calls that really opened his eyes. An older employee mentioned missing his daughter's school play because taking time off required 2 weeks' notice. Another talked about a brilliant idea for improving customer response times that got lost in the maze of management approvals. Near the end of the day, he overheard 2 employees discussing the CEO himself. "I bet he has no idea what it's like down here," one said. "These big shots never leave their fancy offices." He felt his face grow hot, knowing they were right. The team lead stopped by his desk before leaving. "You did good today," she said kindly. "It gets easier, I promise. Though I wish I could promise you better tools to work with." She laughed, but there was a tiredness in her eyes that spoke volumes. As he packed up his things, his hands shook slightly. How had he let things get this bad? He'd built this company from nothing, promising himself he'd never become just another out-of-touch boss. Yet here he was, discovering just how disconnected he'd become. Walking to the bus stop, he watched his employees head home. Some rushed to second jobs, others to pick up kids from daycare. He thought about the millions spent on office renovations upstairs while these people struggled with basic tools to do their jobs. Sitting on the bus, surrounded by his tired employees, he pulled out his phone and started taking notes. The fancy presentation he planned for next month's company meeting suddenly seemed ridiculous. These people didn't need another PowerPoint about corporate values. They needed someone to actually listen. As the bus rumbled through the city streets, he looked out the window at the gleaming corporate office growing smaller in the distance. Today was just the beginning, and already he knew this undercover journey would change everything, starting with himself. Week 2 of the undercover mission brought the CEO to the IT support department, located in the building's basement. The contrast with his executive floor couldn't have been more striking. Instead of sleek modern furniture and artwork, the walls were lined with shelves of old computer parts and tangled cables. His new supervisor, a tech wizard with thick glasses and a worn Star Wars t-shirt, showed him around the cramped space. "Welcome to the dungeon," he joked, But there was truth behind his humor. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, and the air conditioning barely reached this level. The CEO's first task was to shadow the department's most experienced technician, a quiet man who'd been with the company for 8 years. As they walked to their first service call, the technician pulled out a tablet with a cracked screen. "Company won't replace it," he explained, "so I wrote an app to make our jobs easier. Lets us track issues and solutions on the go." "You created that yourself?" the CEO asked, genuinely impressed. "Yeah, submitted it through proper channels 3 times. Got rejected as unnecessary expense. So now we all just use it unofficially." The technician shrugged, but the CEO could hear the frustration in his voice. Throughout the day, he witnessed more examples of his employees' hidden ingenuity. The team had developed unofficial workflows that cut repair times in half. They'd created a knowledge base of solutions that saved hours of troubleshooting. All of this happened under the radar, without recognition or support from above. During lunch, eaten at their desks between service calls, he listened to his coworkers discuss their struggles. One team member talked about staying up late to take online coding classes, hoping to advance his career. Another mentioned paying for essential tools out of his own pocket because the approval process for new equipment took months. A crisis hit mid-afternoon. The sales department's entire system crashed during a crucial client presentation. The CEO watched in amazement as the team sprang into action. His experienced colleague pulled up the homemade app, quickly identifying similar past issues and solutions. "This is why we need that automated diagnostic system I proposed last year," someone muttered while typing frantically. "Could have prevented this whole thing." The CEO remembered that proposal. He'd skimmed it briefly before passing it to middle management for review. He never heard about it again. As they worked, the team shared stories about other close calls and creative fixes. They spoke with pride about keeping the company running smoothly, despite limited resources and recognition. Their dedication was clear, even though most higher-ups probably didn't know their names. The day's biggest revelation came during a coffee break. 2 team members were discussing a recent company-wide email about innovation and employee empowerment. "Funny how they talk about valuing our ideas," one said, "but when's the last time anyone from upstairs actually came down here to see what we do?" Later, while helping to organize the storage room, he found boxes of outdated equipment that could have been upgraded for a fraction of what the company spent on the executive floor's recent renovation. His colleague noticed his surprise. "Yeah, we could do so much more with better tools. But try explaining that to someone who's never worked a tech support ticket in their life." As the day wound down, the team gathered for their daily debrief. They shared solutions, praised each other's clever fixes, and updated their unofficial knowledge base. The CEO watched in silence, remembering how he'd once been just like them, passionate, innovative, eager to improve things from the ground up. On his bus ride home, he thought about all the brilliant ideas buried under bureaucracy, all the talent going unrecognized. His employees weren't just keeping the company's technology running. They were innovating despite the obstacles placed in their way. He pulled out his phone and started writing notes. The IT department needed more than just new equipment. They needed a voice, a direct line to decision-makers who would actually listen. As he typed, he remembered his own early days, working in a garage with big dreams. Somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten what it felt like to be the person with great ideas, but no power to implement them. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, but tonight he had serious thinking to do about how to tear down the walls between the basement and the top floor. The third week brought an unexpected crisis that would reveal the true heart of his company. It started as a normal Wednesday morning, until it wasn't. The CEO, still deep in his undercover role, had just settled at his desk when the first signs of trouble appeared. Servers acting weird, someone called out from across the office. Within minutes, warning messages started popping up on screens throughout the building. The main system was failing, and failing fast. The CEO watched as his employees transformed before his eyes. The usually calm supervisor burst through the door, face tense. It's bigger than we thought. All client data is locked up. Nothing's getting in or out. The office erupted into controlled chaos. People who normally worked in separate departments came together like a well-rehearsed orchestra. A young programmer who usually kept to herself took charge of coordinating the emergency response. The CEO noticed she wore the same clothes as yesterday. She'd apparently stayed overnight debugging another issue. "We need all hands on deck," the supervisor announced. "Anyone who can stay late, we need you." Without hesitation, people started making calls, rearranging their personal lives. A quiet man in the corner spoke softly into his phone. "Hey, honey, I know it's our anniversary dinner, but there's an emergency at work." The CEO felt helpless, aware that his limited technical skills made him more observer than helper. But he watched in awe as his employees tackled the crisis. Nobody complained about missing personal plans. Nobody pointed fingers or made excuses. A single mother on the team called her neighbor, arranging for emergency childcare. "I'll pay you back next week," she promised, worry clear in her voice. The CEO made a mental note. They needed an emergency childcare policy. How had they never thought of that before? Hours ticked by. People worked through lunch, accepting slices of pizza that someone ordered without being asked. The CEO noticed how they supported each other, sharing snacks, offering encouragement, stepping in when someone needed a break. The breakthrough came around 6 p.m. A junior technician, who'd been quietly working in the corner, suddenly sat up straight. "I think I found it." The team huddled around his screen, and within an hour, the system started coming back online. The relief in the room was palpable, but no one left. Instead, they stayed to help verify data, check systems, and make sure nothing was missed. The CEO watched as they documented everything meticulously, even though exhaustion showed on their faces. It was nearly midnight when the last checks were complete. The supervisor looked around the room, eyes bright with pride. "You all did amazing work today. Thank you for staying. Now go home and rest." As people gathered their things, the CEO overheard quiet conversations that broke his heart. The single mother counting the cost of extra child care against her tight budget. The anniversary couple rescheduling their dinner for next month when they could afford it again. The overnight programmer calculating if she had enough gas to get home or needed to take the night bus. These people had just saved the company from a disaster that could have cost millions. Yet here they were, worrying about basic expenses. The contrast with his own life, the comfortable salary, the company car, the flexible schedule, had never felt so stark. Walking to the bus stop with his tired colleagues, he listened to them laugh about the day's events, already turning the crisis into shared stories. Despite everything, their spirit wasn't broken. Their pride in their work, their care for each other, shone through their exhaustion. On the late-night bus ride home, he couldn't stop thinking about what he'd witnessed. The crisis had revealed more than just the resilience of his workforce. It had shown him the gap between the company's stated values and the reality his employees lived every day. He opened his notes app and started typing with shaking fingers. The list grew longer and longer. Emergency childcare support, better overtime compensation, crisis response bonuses, recognition programs that actually meant something. By the time he reached his stop, he had pages of changes that needed to happen. Looking back at the darkened office building in the distance, he made a silent promise to the people who'd given up their evening to save the company. Things were going to change. They had to change. The question was, would they believe him when he finally revealed who he really was? The warehouse hit differently. After 3 weeks in various departments, the CEO thought he'd seen it all. But nothing prepared him for the physical demands of working in the company's distribution center. His first morning started at 5 a.m., muscles aching as he tried to keep up with the seasoned warehouse workers. A veteran employee with 20 years of experience showed him the ropes. The man's hands were calloused, his movements efficient from years of practice. "Watch how I lift," he demonstrated. "Wrong whale wreck your back by lunch." His expertise was obvious, yet his name tag still read Associate, the same title given to new hires. Throughout the morning, the CEO struggled with the physical demands. Each box felt heavier than the last, and the warehouse's climate control seemed to work only sporadically. Sweat soaked through his shirt as he learned to operate the hand truck, stack boxes, and navigate the maze of shelves. "Been here long?" he asked his trainer during their first break. The response was a mix of pride and something else. Frustration, maybe resignation. 20 years next month," the man replied, stretching his back. "Applied for supervisor 3 times. Got passed over each time for folks from outside. They say I lack management experience, but I've trained half the people here." The CEO listened as his trainer shared more during their shift. The man had developed better loading patterns that saved time and reduced strain. He created an informal training program for new hires that cut injury rates. He'd even drafted proposals for improving warehouse efficiency. All of these initiatives he did on his own time, without recognition or compensation. Around midday, they encountered the results of upper management's latest efficiency mandate. New quota requirements that looked good on paper, but ignored workplace realities. "They want us to move 30% more packages," someone grumbled during lunch. "But they've never tried lifting these boxes themselves." The CEO noticed something else too. The workforce here was notably more diverse than upstairs, yet leadership remained strikingly homogeneous. His trainer mentioned quietly that he'd seen multiple qualified minority candidates overlooked for advancement. "Sometimes feels like some of us hit a ceiling that others don't even see," he said, not knowing he was speaking to the black CEO himself. The afternoon brought a sobering incident. A young worker nearly injured himself trying to meet the new quotas. The veteran staff immediately stepped in, showing him safer methods, sharing techniques they'd learned through years of experience. Their knowledge was invaluable, yet officially unrecognized. "We keep telling them we need better equipment," one worker explained while helping a colleague with a particularly heavy load. "These lift assists are older than some of our new hires. But somehow there's always budget for new decorations in the executive lobby." As the day wore on, the CEO observed countless examples of workplace wisdom that never made it up the chain of command. Workers had developed hand signals to communicate across noisy aisles, created unofficial maps of the most efficient routes through the warehouse, and established their own system for preventing errors. Near the end of his shift, he overheard 2 longtime employees discussing retirement. "Can't afford to stop yet," one said. "Health insurance costs too much, and the pension ain't what it used to be." The other nodded in agreement, both unaware that their conversation was being heard by the person who could actually change these policies. The CEO's muscles screamed as he clocked out, but his mind was racing. He thought about his trainer's rejected promotions, about the wisdom being ignored, about the physical toll this work took on people who'd given decades to the company. He thought about his own journey from entry-level worker to CEO, and how many doors had opened for him that seemed firmly closed to others. On his drive home, he was too exhausted for the bus. He dictated notes into his phone. The inequities he'd witnessed weren't just about working conditions. They were about missed opportunities, about voices going unheard, about talent being overlooked because it came in packages that didn't match management's expectations. He parked outside his house, but didn't get out immediately. 20 years of faithful service, countless innovations, dedicated mentorship of new employees, and still stuck at entry level. The warehouse had shown him more than just physical challenges. It had shown him how his company was wasting its most valuable resource, its people's potential. The breaking point came in the accounting department of all places. After weeks of witnessing the struggles across different departments, the CEO found himself in what should have been the quietest part of the company. Instead, he discovered a powder keg of frustration ready to explode. It started with a simple customer refund request. A young accountant was trying to help a client who'd been double charged due to a system glitch. The solution seemed straightforward: return the extra payment. But nothing was ever that simple. I need 3 levels of approval for this refund, the accountant explained, clearly frustrated. Meanwhile, the customer's bank is charging them overdraft fees because of our mistake. She'd been trying to resolve the issue for 2 days, trapped in a maze of paperwork and policies. The department manager, a stern-faced woman who clearly took pride in following every rule to the letter, walked by their desks. "Those policies exist for a reason," she said sharply. "If you can't handle following proper procedures, perhaps this isn't the right position for you." The CEO watched as the young accountant's shoulders slumped. Later, during coffee break, he learned this wasn't an isolated incident. The entire department was suffocating under rigid policies that made little sense in the real world. "We spend more time getting approvals than actually helping people," one employee whispered, constantly glancing over his shoulder. "Last week, a single mom was crying on the phone because we couldn't process her refund fast enough. Her kid's daycare payment bounced because of our mistake." The tension in the office was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every conversation seemed muted, every movement cautious. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. These were real people dealing with real problems, but the system treated them all like potential criminals. The situation finally boiled over during a department meeting. The topic was a new layer of approval requirements being added to the process. One brave soul spoke up. "These policies are hurting our customers and killing our productivity." The manager's response was ice cold. "If you're not comfortable with our procedures, there's the door." Something snapped inside the CEO at that moment. He watched as talented, caring professionals were reduced to silent box checkers. The very people who handled the company's money were treated like they couldn't be trusted to make the smallest decisions. During lunch, he sat in the break room, listening to his colleagues share horror stories. An elderly customer who waited weeks for a simple billing correction. A small business owner who nearly lost his contracts due to delayed payments. A new mother who couldn't buy formula because of a frozen account that no one had the authority to unfreeze quickly. "Remember when we could actually help people?" a veteran employee asked quietly. "Now we spend all day apologizing for policies we didn't create and can't change." The CEO struggled to maintain his cover as he witnessed more throughout the day. Bright, capable employees reduced to robotic policy followers. Innovation and critical thinking discouraged. Common sense sacrificed at the altar of procedure. He watched as the young accountant from the morning finally got her refund approved, too late to help the customer avoid overdraft fees. Her eyes were red from holding back tears of frustration. "I got into accounting to help people understand their money," she said during their end-of-day filing. "Now I feel like I'm just another barrier in their way." On his way out, he overheard 2 senior accountants talking. "Upper management has no idea what these policies do to our customers," one said. "They're too focused on theoretical risks to see the actual damage we're causing." Sitting in his car that evening, the CEO couldn't shake the weight of what he witnessed. The accounting department was supposed to be the heart of financial responsibility, not a bureaucratic nightmare. He'd approved many of these policies himself, always erring on the side of caution. But at what cost? He pulled out his notebook, hands shaking slightly as he wrote. The company had built a fortress of procedures so strong it was strangling its own ability to serve customers. Trust had been replaced by paperwork, judgment by rigid rules, humanity by bureaucracy. This wasn't just about streamlining processes anymore. It was about remembering that behind every transaction was a real person. Every policy affected real lives, and every barrier they created had real consequences. Something had to change, and soon. 6 weeks had passed, and the time had come. The CEO sat in his temporary apartment, looking at his reflection one last time. Tomorrow, he would reveal everything. His hands trembled slightly as he prepared for the company-wide meeting he'd called. Early morning found him in the building's main conference center, watching from backstage as employees filled the seats. He recognized so many faces now: the kind team lead from customer service, the brilliant IT techs, the hard-working warehouse veteran, the frustrated accountants. Each person carried stories he now knew intimately. The room buzzed with speculation about the meeting. "Probably another boring presentation of company values," someone said nearby. "Bet the CEO won't even show up. He's been traveling for weeks." At exactly 9 a.m., the senior VP took the stage to introduce the meeting. The CEO watched from behind the curtain, his heart pounding. He'd removed his disguise that morning, returning to his usual appearance, but somehow his familiar clothes felt foreign now. "Before we begin," the VP announced, "we have a special presentation from someone who's been working among us these past 6 weeks." The room grew quiet as the CEO walked onto the stage. He saw recognition dawn on faces throughout the audience: the new hire from IT, the struggling trainee from customer service, the quiet worker from the warehouse. Gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd. "Yes," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "For the past 6 weeks, I've been working alongside you, learning what it truly means to be part of this company from the ground up." He paused, making eye contact with people he'd worked with. "And I owe you all an apology." The silence deepened. He could see shock, disbelief, and even anger on some faces. The accounting department manager looked like she might faint, probably remembering her harsh words about policy compliance. "I thought I knew this company," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought I understood our challenges. I was wrong. Over these weeks, I've seen incredible dedication, untapped wisdom, and painful struggles that I never knew existed." He clicked through slides showing photos from his journey: the outdated equipment in IT, the cramped break room in customer service, the aging warehouse machinery. With each image, he shared stories of the people he'd met, the innovations they'd created, the obstacles they faced. To the customer service team who stays late to help people in crisis: "We're upgrading your systems, starting next week." To our IT department, creating brilliant solutions with outdated tools: "Your budget has been tripled. And that app you developed, it's becoming our official system." The room stirred. People sat up straighter, exchanged glances. He continued, addressing each department's specific challenges. To our warehouse team: "New equipment is already on order, and we're implementing a direct leadership promotion track." To our accounting department: "We're completely overhauling our approval processes. No more 3-level authorization for basic customer service." Then came the bigger announcements. "Effective immediately, we're introducing emergency childcare support, increasing our healthcare coverage, and implementing a true open-door policy where any employee can bring ideas directly to leadership." He saw tears in some eyes, skepticism in others. "I know these are just words right now. You've heard promises before. But here's the difference. I've lived your experiences. I've felt your frustrations. And I'm not the same person who left that top-floor office 6 weeks ago." The CEO stepped away from the podium, moving closer to the audience. "This isn't just about policy changes. It's about rebuilding trust. It's about remembering that every person in this room contributes to our success. It's about creating the company we should have been all along." He looked directly at the warehouse veteran who trained him. "Starting today, you're our new warehouse operations director. Your experience and innovation are exactly what we need in leadership." The room erupted in applause. The veteran sat stunned, while his colleagues patted his back with obvious joy and approval. "This is just the beginning," the CEO concluded. "I've learned more in 6 weeks on the ground than in years in my office. Now it's time to rebuild this company together, not as bosses and employees, but as one team, with everyone's voice heard and valued." The meeting ended, but nobody rushed to leave. People gathered in groups talking excitedly, some approaching him with tears in their eyes. The walls between management and staff had begun to crumble, and in their place, something new was growing: hope. 6 months later, the company had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The CEO sat in his office, reviewing the latest employee satisfaction survey, but this time, a smile spread across his face. The numbers told a story of real change. The morning started with his new daily routine: a walk through different departments, not as a boss doing inspections, but as someone genuinely interested in his people's work and lives. In customer service, the team now worked with brand new computers and a streamlined system. The kind team lead who had helped him during his undercover days was now head of customer experience, implementing training programs she dreamed of for years. "Look at these response times," she said proudly, showing him their latest metrics. Customer satisfaction had skyrocketed, and employee turnover had dropped by 60%. The once cramped break room had been transformed into a comfortable space where team members could truly rest between calls. In it, the atmosphere was completely different. The basement had been renovated with proper lighting and ventilation. The Brilliant Technicians app was now the company's official system, and he'd been promoted to lead a new innovation team. Others who had hidden their talents for years were finally getting chances to shine. "Remember when we had to beg for basic equipment?" a tech team member joked, showing off their new development lab. The department had become a hub of innovation, with regular brainstorming sessions that directly influenced company decisions. The warehouse had undergone the most visible transformation. New safety equipment gleamed under improved lighting, and the previously ignored suggestion box had been replaced by weekly team meetings where workers directly shaped policy. The veteran employee, now warehouse operations director, had implemented changes that increased efficiency while reducing worker strain. "Had my first directors meeting yesterday," he told the CEO during their weekly check-in. "Never thought I'd see the day when someone from the warehouse would sit at that table. My team's already submitted 3 new improvement proposals." In accounting, the transformation was profound. The rigid manager had been reassigned, replaced by someone who understood the balance between security and service. The young accountant who'd struggled with the refund system was now leading a team dedicated to customer financial care, with authority to make real-time decisions. "We resolved that elderly customers' issue in 10 minutes today," she beamed. Under the old system, it would have taken 2 weeks. The department's walls, once covered in policy reminders, now displayed their new motto: "People first, paper second." The CEO's proudest achievement wasn't in the numbers, though they were impressive. It was in the small moments: seeing people smile as they came to work, hearing laughter in meetings, watching ideas flow freely between all levels of the company. The invisible walls between departments had crumbled, replaced by genuine collaboration. Employee benefits had been completely overhauled. The emergency childcare program had already helped dozens of parents handle unexpected situations without losing pay. The improved healthcare plan meant fewer employees had to choose between medical care and paying bills. A new education support program helped staff pursue advanced training and degrees. But the most significant change was in the company's culture. The suggestion box wasn't just a box anymore. It was a direct line to leadership. Every Friday, employees from all levels met to discuss challenges and solutions. The executive floor, once an exclusive zone, was now open to all employees. During the latest board meeting, the CEO brought in frontline workers to present their ideas directly. The same board members who doubted his undercover plan now nodded in approval at the results: profits up, costs down, and employee satisfaction at record highs. As he wrapped up his day, the CEO paused at his office window, watching employees leave work. Unlike 6 months ago, people walked out chatting and smiling, not rushing to second jobs or worrying about bills. The company cars now included a fleet of energy-efficient vehicles available to all employees who needed transportation help. On his desk lay a simple thank you card from the warehouse team. Inside, dozens of signatures surrounded a simple message: You didn't just change the company, you changed lives. The CEO smiled, remembering his first nervous day undercover. The journey had transformed not just the company, but him as well. He rediscovered what truly mattered, not just the bottom line, but the lives and dreams of the people who made that bottom line possible.